Mr. Waniak.
Hi, Judy.
Hello,
Hi, Francis. How you doing? Good to see you guys
Thank you
again.
for joining us.
Yeah, great program so far. Listening into quite a few other Mark Rushbrook, Dave Wilson today. Very, very good. Very
It's
interesting.
Yes.
amazing to hear what's in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, which is part of our business, right? What's next? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, we have been live since 5:45. So every day, a big
Yeah.
long day. We start very early on. We started the day with Steve Phelps, president of NASCAR. It was a great interview. We traveled to the Middle East. We interviewed the Sheikh of Bahrain,
Wow.
international circuits, who runs I mean, it's not only an F1 venue, but it's really a very active racetrack in the Middle East. We went to Germany and talked with the World Rally Championship organizers, went back, of course, to the US, and the last 2 days have been absolutely packed. And so we're so glad to have you back, John. And why don't you tell us a little bit of what you put together?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. We've got a session we actually did, thanks with Judy. We worked with the military, particularly the U.S. Army Futures Command, last August, and put together a session on how to transfer racing technology to the defense industry, and particularly ground vehicles, if it has tracks on it or wheels on. And, with the advent of the Russians invading Ukraine, all that, there has been a tremendous technology transfer taking place from a lot of our partners. And I think Jim McManus was on yesterday, I think, Judy. Very good. And he's, thanks to Judy and Jim, we were part of that program last August. We will have another program this August, but it went over extremely well. We had a flagship session on racing, a keynote session, and just some greats. There were 2,000 people in the audience. Industry contractors.
You were a great host, and you put together a fabulous panel. It was, we want the military to win.
Absolutely. So it was actually Judy's catalyst here, her idea, that we said, why don't we do this at Race Industry Week in December? So we're very fortunate. We've got Dr. Rob Kruka from Clemson University, CUI car, as well as Dave Birkenfeld with Extreme E, Chip Ganassi Racing team leader. So we're going to really get into some of the stuff we talked about in August, but give some updates as well on some of the really cool stuff that the military is learning, particularly from, I'm saying the Indy Autonomous Challenge, King of the Hammers, off-road racing companies like Fox Factory, Pratt Miller, et cetera. So.
Yeah. Good morning.
Very good. Excellent. So good morning, Robert, and good morning, David. And thank you for joining us. So, John, it's 12 o'clock here in California in the ePortrait studio. So you are going to be in charge for the next 50 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. Good. Well, I'm just the guy behind the curtain. The two pros are right up there.
Oh,
Rob and Dave. And
No
so what I'm
pressure.
going to share my screen. I'm going to give you kind of a 10-minute overview. I'm going to frame some of the topics that we want to talk about. And then going to have Rob and Dave come up. Dave's going to be first. Give an overview of Extreme E, what Chip Ganassi Racing has been up to, et cetera, I think, and how we can transfer some of that technology to warfighters, but also a mixture of the racing technology as well, the latest stuff, if you will, that's happening, particularly with Rob and CUI car, the Viper program, which is virtual prototyping, and a lot of the dimensions of racing and the vectors of racing that create new businesses and new opportunities for us all. So let me share my screen here. And, let's see. Up here. That up. Let's see, where did he go? Let's see. So I'm gonna. Okay, I'm gonna make that bigger. No, that's not working too well.
Modern technology, John.
Yeah, let's see. I got too many things open here, so I want to open that. Yeah, it's coming. I don't know why it's getting so small there. It opened it on my desktop. Let's see. There we go. So can you see that?
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
You might want to
Good.
put it in display mode. Looks good now, John.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So, yeah, I'm going to take the next 10 minutes or so, but we're going to talk about a whole wide range of really things that are happening that I think that impact a lot of the listeners and viewers of our session today, and folks that tune in after recording. But again, focusing on the Gemba. And if you're not familiar with the term Gemba, it's a Japanese term for the front line. And the front line, particularly where action takes place and where value is created. And we're going to focus on how racing is part of our connected, autonomous, certainly electrified future. And we'll get into a lot of that. But also making cars faster, smarter, cooler, and safer, and bringing our warfighters home safely. And a lot of that technology that we're transferring to the military through racing. And I got to admit, from a postscript from our session with Dave and Rob back in August, there's a lot taking place in the defense industry, particularly U.S. Army Futures Command. Dr. David Gorsuch, Dr. Denise Rizzo, et cetera. They are very interested in how we can help them. So we're going to get into some of those postscripts, if you will, from our session. But racing is part of our future, as I've always said. And people race and companies race for basically 3 reasons and one ultimate goal. Those 3 reasons are to solve problems, particularly complex problems, to demonstrate technology, in many cases on the world stage, like we'll be talking about, and probably most importantly, to inspire the next generation of STEM and STEAM leaders. And that one ultimate goal, and Dave reminded me this very well back in August, is to win. And that's what Chip Ganassi said. Why do we race? To win. So again, we can have those 3 principles or directions, if you will, but the main reason is to win. So we want to get into some of that as well. This is not new. If you look at the King of the Hammers Ultra 4 vehicle there, a lot of those types of technology transferred right over to the GM defense vehicle, the ISV that you see there. And great companies, as I mentioned, like Fox, Hendrick Motorsports, GM Defense, Pratt Miller, Army Futures Command. They're taking advantage of a lot of that technology, and they're providing soldiers what they need before they need it. So again, there's that lead time, if you will, why we want to transfer at the pace of racing and scale to these military platforms to get that into our warfighters' hands to protect tomorrow and do that today. So we want to get a lot of that, those ideas, if you will, kind of to our audience today and get some of the feedback when we get to the questions. And it's accelerating racing and innovation at the speed of combat, which Dave will be able to talk to that personally, but it truly is at the speed of a race, if you will, what our warfighters need. And these technologies that we'll be talking about are getting into our warfighters' hands, most importantly, bring them home safely. Kind of the frame, some of the topics that we'll be talking about to lead that conversation, and topics that are relevant, very relevant to the military and to the racing community, and things that matter. That's what we want to focus on today. As I mentioned, solving complex problems, particularly extreme edge cases to advance technology, again, at the racing pace and at the military combat space. Demonstrating technology, pushing innovation and proof of concepts in real time in fielded applications, not just the lab, but getting them out, that technology readiness level, if you will, all the way out to the 9s, taking it out and being ready to actually be applied. Inspiring the next generation of leaders, as I mentioned, the talent development pipeline. And Rob's going to talk a bit about that with what CU ICAR has been leading with a project called Deep Orange. We're going on 15 years. There's over 1,000 graduates from the University of Clemson University grad school that are actually in industry today. 300 of them, I believe, are actually in the Detroit area, in the performance and racing groups. Defining eras and attitudes, connected, automated, and electrified vehicles. If you think about how the racing, and particularly the performance industry started, a lot of that started with garage mechanics, if you will, and they defined an era as well as an attitude. A lot of these new technologies are doing the same. They are defining the next generation's attitude. Again, we've got Dave, and we'll talk about electric racing, electric vehicle racing, and electrification particularly, because to be average is dangerous today. If you're not taking advantage of where particularly the OEMs are going with the electrification and electrified powertrains, you're really taking a big risk because you need to be there. And I always tell folks that awareness is nothing. Relevance is everything. You have to be relevant to the consumers, to the market segments that you're engaging in, and racing is the best way to accelerate some of that. Vehicle complexity is outpacing our ability to manage it. Managing disruptive technologies at the pace today is very difficult. This is one of the first times in history that vehicles have become so complex that we have a tough time doing that, not just at the software level and hardware level, but the sensor fusion level. How do we bring all this together? And that disruptive technology leads to a lot of new applications that we can demonstrate through racing and transfer to military applications. Software, safety, digital vehicle architectures are some of the new performance metrics. We'll be talking about that as well. And then certainly, the tools, the generative design, the additive manufacturing, the digital twins. These are the types of tools and processes that really make the impossible possible. Doing it at a simulator level, then taking it to the track, running the track or the race 10 times before you actually get there physically, so that you can sort things out, set the vehicle up, and make sure that that transfer of technology, in this case to the military, is just as valuable as it is to the race car drivers. There's something called the triple helix model. If you haven't heard about it, look it up on Google, but it's basically a model for integrating government, industry, and academia. It's a major push, if you will, in terms of a model for integrating some of these best applications, and more importantly, growing your business if the military applications are something that you're interested in pursuing. We're very fortunate. We're just over a year out of the first Indy Autonomous Challenge that Paul Mitchell and his team put together, particularly with Rob Pruka and the folks at CUI Car that actually architected the Dallara AV21 chassis that's put together and run by Jukos Racing for the 10 teams that competed. And I think there were 40 universities. Rob will give us an update on that. But the first race was actually at the Brickyard last 23rd of October. $1 million prize to the winners. It was the German team, TUM, that actually won that. And there's another race that will be held coming up at Consumer Electronics Show, January 7th. Rob, you're going to actually do the announcing, I believe, again. So that race will be at January 7th. If any of you are going to be out at CES, love to see you there. There'll be shuttles from the West Hall, the Indy Autonomous garage paddocks will have shuttles going out to Las Vegas Motor Speedway every day. And the race, as I mentioned, is on Saturday. It is truly something to behold, because I think the speed was 220 at Kennedy Space Center, I think, Rob, perhaps.
I think 192.2, I think is
192,
what they got to. Yeah.
192 miles an hour without driver. And I want to make something very clear. The Indy Autonomous Challenge is not about taking the driver out of the loop. We will always have a Scott Dixon. We'll always have a winner like Marcus Ericsson with Chip Ganassi Racing at the Indy 500. That's what racing is about. This is about solving extreme edge cases to make cars faster, smarter, safer, and more. So we're bringing extreme edge cases of racing into the vehicles to help do all four of those objectives. So again, it's not about taking the driver out of the loop. These are things that can actually help drivers improve. For example, if Jimmy Johnson or Scott Dixon or Marcus saw that Indy Autonomous, let's say it's AV35, Dallara chassis, does 290 miles an hour at Las Vegas or at the Brickyard at a test, then they know that vehicle can actually do those speeds. That's something they can transfer into the human side of the driving that is learned from an autonomous vehicle. So again, it's not about taking the driver out of the loop. It's about improving racing, and particularly the technologies behind racing. Perhaps not as significant as the Indy Autonomous Challenge was at the Brickyard, but nonetheless very significant from an off-road racing perspective, is King of the Hammers. And last February on the 2nd, we introduced the first King of the Hammers EV crate package. And Dave Cole, the founder of Hammers, awarded that package to 11 teams. And you can see the package there, developed by Hypercraft, Dana AM at the time, and King of the Hammers and the board. Rob's actually on the board as well. We've got Cal Wells on that board as well. So a lot of great experts and visionaries and folks helping develop this package. We're hoping to have that vehicle race at, if not do a demonstration, at Hammers coming up in February this year. But again, you have to start somewhere. Starting and leading the EV Ultra 4 package, thanks to Dave Cole at Hammers, is a way to get that started. And I'm sure we're going to see some of that certainly in score racing. I know Matt Martelli's on with the Mint 400 coming up in the program. There's a lot of EV packages that are starting to enter into racing. We want to help seed that as well with Hammers. So you might look at, again, let's call this the AV Gemba. What's happening there? It's actually advanced systems, if you will, for unstructured environments. What I'll call it the off-road environment is unstructured. It's not like a track at the Brickyard or at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So you need smart products. So there's a program at DARPA, the RACER program, which is robotic autonomy in complex environments with resiliency. That's a mouthful. But if you understand how they're getting there, there's actually things that are kind of what I'll call the bridge, just like the Ford Raptor Bronco. It's equipped with live valve, box shock. So yeah, they're not fully autonomous, but they're certainly active. It is an active shock, being able to increase damping and everything else with that vehicle. And as we move to the next stage of that, you can imagine what the connected products and connected systems are going to do to take that human baseline, apply it to the autonomous baseline, and then give that feedback loop back to the drivers to actually improve the vehicle and improve the racing. So we'll see quite a bit of that. And I can learn more about the DARPA Racer program that's run by Dr. Stuart Young with DARPA, and doing a great job. I think there's 6 or so the Polaris vehicles that they have. They're tested out at Fort Irwin and Fort Hood in Texas. So lots to learn there. Real time. What's happening today out in the deserts, the floating laboratory, as I call it, with Dave and with Extreme E, putting all the vehicles on the ship and taking them around to all these great environments and demonstrating not just the technology of racing, but the social impact of what they're doing with electric vehicles. And again, taking someone great team like Chip Ganassi Racing from what they learn in IndyCar and applying it to Extreme E, and taking that lead along with Michael Andretti and some of the other teams. Lewis Hamilton, I think his team won this past weekend in Uruguay, and Dave will tell us more about that. But the Extreme E Spotlight, looking at what's actually happening with Extreme E racing and how that's translating into some of the off-road and some of the military applications we'll talk about with development with U.S. Army Futures Command, CUICAR, and Dave will tell us more about the Viper program at Clemson as well. So with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over. As I mentioned, we've got a great speaker good today with Dave Birkenfeld, team leader at Extreme E Racing with Chip Ganassi Racing. So thanks for being with us today, Dave. And certainly Rob Pruka, good friend from CUICAR, a longtime friend. He's actually the Alan Kulwicki professor at CUICAR, which some of our audience may remember Alan, which great racer and a great engineer as well. And then, so once Dave gives a 10, 15 minute or so overview of Extreme E Racing, and then Rob will give an overview of CUICAR and some of the really cool things happening at Clemson. And then we're going to kind of open it up to discussion among them and any questions that the audience may want to come in. So Dave, you want me to run your video first, or you want to give an overview first?
Yeah, maybe just we'll do a little bit of an overview we'll start there.
Okay.
Thanks, John, and great to see you again. Rob, just I feel like it was just a few days ago that we were up in Detroit talking this, and it feels
Absolutely.
like, yeah, we've run a whole championship since then almost. So yeah, really cool. I love this stuff, the technology and innovation and where it's going, how it connects to the military, something, obviously near and dear to my heart. Spending a lot of years, 20 plus years in the military, doing a lot of this stuff. And then having the opportunity to jump into big time motorsports with Chip Ganassi and the team here, and being an integral part of Extreme E, really from some of the first principal meetings, and seeing where Extreme E came from conceptually a little bit, and then where we are now, continuing in the development, finishing our second year this year. It's an amazing second season, and all the learnings for the race team, for our race team, that have gone into that over the last 2 years, coming frankly from sort of the back of the field up through this last race in Uruguay, where we finished the championship in fourth place there, really fighting for the championship through to the last race, which I'm really proud of the whole team, from the organization, of everyone in Chip Ganassi Racing and GMC Hummer EV behind us there. So really, really cool. Glad to be here, John. So yeah, maybe we start there, and if you want to throw that sizzle reel up, and then we'll sort of start talking some Extreme E specifics.
Stop sharing this for now. Let's see. Stop sharing that. Pull that over and here. Pull that off. Will that show up?
No, not yet.
So I'll go back to share screen. So I think I have to share screen first. Let's see. I lost the share. So let's see, share screen.
So we don't have to either, John. I mean, everyone knows probably in motorsports, US motorsports, where we're where we are, who Chip Ganassi Racing is, and where we've come from. So, you know, the 5-minute blurb there, long-term motorsports program, IndyCar, sports car, and now Extreme E over the last 2 years with GMC Hummer. I think the really interesting thing about Extreme E is that while obviously high-level motorsports, we're really creating a new sport. And why I say that is that right now there is no sporting format out there that is anywhere similar. There is nothing that is off-road, all electric, all over the planet. 100% electric. We're not talking hybrid here. That also has a mandated sporting format of having a male and female race car driver involved. And the story of that really continues down deeper. We're only allowed to bring 10 people to each one of these tracks to try to limit teams' cost, to try to limit the carbon footprint of the series, to try to identify opportunities within the team that we can bring new people into motorsports. Lewis Hamilton has recently started something called the Hamilton Commission to bring underprivileged and under sort of resourced folks into the series, and we're excited to participate in that next year. The series is definitely a learning process, right? Like these things that we are learning every day, it's sort of a little bit of a moving needle. What does a pit lane look like in this type of environment where we are not creating the same circuit, where every circuit is different? What do standard driver switch formats look like? What do the safety protocols look like with a high voltage safety system or a high voltage electrification system? What does the logistics look like for a big race team traveling all over the planet here? I mean, if we look over the last 24 months, Extreme E has been to Spain, Saudi Arabia twice, Uruguay, Greenland, Italy twice, the Jurassic Coast in Great Britain, and a number of other locations. And we've gotten there, our race cars have gotten there via a ship, actually. And so it's a floating paddock that takes our cars and equipment to each one of these locations. And so that limits the things that we can bring as a team. Things like our pit equipment, our timing stands, our engineering stands, our spare parts, everything down to white shirts and hats and safety glasses there. We really have to think through that logistics process and be well ahead of it. And it creates unique problems for each race team. Is the time on track is so short, the driver standard is so high, which then makes the pace very, very quick. When pace and driver standard, short time on track, developing car, extreme tracks all come together, you are looking at sometimes big time adventure, cars going off track, cars in teams maybe running out of talent at that moment, creating some contact, and how the teams react to that and how the series reacts to that is really cool, really exciting. It makes for exciting racing. The format is short bursts of race. We're in a bracket style format where we go through a single car qualifying round into a multi-car qualifying round with intermediate points. And then that lays out a semifinal bracket with a last chance qualifier that we will bring one winning car into the final from what's called the crazy race. And then a 5-car final. And that 5-car final is, male and female drivers competing head to head. Depending on lap distance, we're sort of, 3 to 5 kilometers per lap, 4 laps per race, with a switch in between there, winner take all. So it's a really interesting format that is high intensity. I can tell you, from being with CGR here and having the opportunity to, stand on Scott Dixon's stand or sports car stand, or, that the intensity inside the Extreme E command center there is based on how short these races are and how critical these races are. It's high drama, and it creates for some really good racing. The cross section of teams, I think, within the organization, I think, is worth noting. We have some great teams in Extreme E, like you mentioned, X44, owned by Lewis Hamilton there, actually run by ProDrive in Europe. Great big European motorsports program. Carlos Sainz owns a team. Essiona Sainz, Jensen Button owns a team. Nico Rosberg owns a team. It's just, the list goes on. If you go in the global off-road world, and you start thinking about big names from Dakar or big names from global rally, names like Carlos Sainz, names like Sebastian Loeb, names that are all over there, they are in Extreme E. It's increasing the level of competition. And the other thing that's really cool about it is we are mandated to have a female driver there. And so what you're seeing right now, which is really cool, I think, is that you're seeing these names like Sebastian Loeb, 9-time rally champion, next to names that maybe you've never seen before. And it's highlighting these great young female talents that are going up through the rally series or through the American off-road series. Sarah Price has done a great job for us over the last couple of years. And it's really cool to see them battling door to door with these big global superstars, frankly. So yeah, it's a really interesting series. We're excited to be part of it.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I think for our viewers and our audience, these are spec cars, right? So it's interesting. It truly is. It's kind of like the old IROC series. This is basically drivers' skill sets and talents with the same cars, but the cars are so advanced. I know you drive with the GM Hummer, as your GM partner, but it's basically a spec car in the branding, if you will. But as you mentioned with Sarah was the first female race winner for Chip Ganassi Racing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a good point. The car is built by an organization called Spark Racing Technologies out of France. They're the same manufacturer that builds the Formula E car, both, the last generation car and the modern car that's just being released. Yeah, when you think about the things that the teams can change or tune on the car, they're pretty limited. Obviously we can do, when we think about it, and when I think about it, I think about it in a couple different bins. One is just frankly the physical setup of the car, right? Like we can control ride height, we can control shock, we can control crossover rings. We can't do valving. You'd mentioned Fox a little bit. prior. Fox came in this year as the factory partner to Extreme E, and we're really happy about that. And my hat's off to Spark and Fox for making that commitment. It happened in a very short period of time, and really it was based on looking at the problems that we had last year with the car. A lot of them around reliability, as well as performance, really could be boiled down to shock development, shock size, the right part for the right job. And Fox had the opportunity to do, some very small testing with the car, and came up with a shock package that would fit on the car, a dual shock package for the rear with a external bypass and a coilover on the rear, and then a coilover internal bypass on the front. And they produced enough cars for the whole series in like, a month and a half, which is absolutely amazing. And my hats off to, Bobby and Brian and the whole team from Fox for stepping up in a big way, and then bringing that, and also just the name brand, the standing behind their brand, bringing that to the paddock. They bring a whole team of reps and service technicians. They're rebuilding shocks as required, and I think it really represented, American off-road in a good way to a bunch of the big European teams that maybe didn't understand what Fox was about, didn't understand the level of knowledge that was there. And that's been really, really positive. So, going down the path there, we can do some physical setup, and then we also get the opportunity to do some digital setup. The Extreme E car is, a 400 kilowatt car, 200 motor in the front, 200 motor in the rear. And if you're not familiar with EVs, but you're familiar with four-wheel drive cars, they're in a standard four-wheel drive race car, or any four-wheel drive car, you have a mechanical linkage between the front and the back, right? You have a one-to-one ratio there. Front axle's doing something, the rear axle's doing the exact same thing generally. Well, one of the things with electrification is we can control that digitally, which is really interesting. It's a bias, and whether we want the front to overspeed or the rear to overspeed. And so it's an interesting challenge to try to define something that maybe has never been defined before in off-road. What do we want to dig more to affect launch, which is, launch basically is corner to corner speed and pace. So it's just one of sort of many things there. I jokingly say that the car is a very simple car. It doesn't have a big cooling system. It doesn't have a fuel cell. Doesn't have, has a couple radiators to cool some electronics, but very limited plumbing. No engine. The electrification is a simple process. And then on the same sense, I'll say it's a very advanced car, right? But it's how you plug into it. It's the control infrastructure. It's what the engineers are jumping into, and also what Spark's jumping into. So, let's say there's 200 channels on the car. The race teams are, allowed to jump into about, 40 of them or so to make, parameter changes. But very, very exciting. And I think that, we're just at the cusp of seeing that development continue to go. We're starting to understand parasitic drag. We're starting to understand, heat cycles in a battery, cooling cycles, how to run and race this car, and how to win this car, or win with this car, and then how to do it within the sporting format that's continuing to develop a little bit too. So it's exciting for sure.
It is. And as you mentioned with like Fox, having companies like Fox that are redefining vehicle dynamics coming into Extreme E. And, you know, you mentioned Bobby and Brian, and you have people, Tom Fletcher, Mike Dennison, Michael McSweeney. It's that culture that they have, that they want to support venues like Extreme E to get to that next level, because they know that EVs are part of their future as well as consumers' future. So very good. So great overview. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dave. So in your segue, the digital part, digital engineering particularly, our digital expert is on. So, and Robert,
Sure.
since I'm not the digital expert, how about if you share your own
I can
screen?
share my screen. I was going to suggest that for you, John. Help you out a little bit.
I could see it, see the wheels turning. So there
Yep.
you go.
All
We
right.
got
I'm
some
almost
great
there.
stuff to show.
Give
So.
me just a second and we will get up to the start. Can you see that, John?
Yep, all good.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks, John. Yeah, as John mentioned, I'm Rob Pruka. I'm a professor at Clemson University in the Department of Automotive Engineering. I happen to hold a professorship in Alan Kowicki's name, which is pretty cool because he was one of my favorite NASCAR drivers as a kid. We have a graduate program in Greenville, South Carolina that's dedicated to automotive engineering alone. We're actually starting an undergraduate program here soon as well. We're just part of Clemson University, which is just about 45 minutes down the road from us. And one of the unique things that I want to talk about today is really our educational process, right? My mission as a professor is really to develop talent that will hopefully, these people or the students, put them in a good position for careers that will last 30 years. And it's really hard to say. I know 30 years ago, we would have never thought we might see driverless vehicles or electric race cars or any of the things that we're seeing today. And so it's really a difficult thing to try to figure out, what are we going to see 30 years from now, and how do you put the skill sets that you need into a student so they can survive throughout a long career. And so what we looked at was really, one of the big challenges is just how do we integrate these super complicated systems these days? With cars that are now becoming robots, they already had complicated powertrains and chassis control systems. Of course, now there are a lot of robotics involved with the ADAS systems, or even fully driverless in some cases, and all of the safety systems as well. And what we decided early on at Clemson is that we could not teach this out of a textbook. You just can't do it. You have to just go and try to build a vehicle. And so we came up with a process we call Deep Orange, where we basically design and build a prototype vehicle with our students every year. So every new incoming class gets this. They start with some sort of strategy. They have to go all the way around and design the vehicle and ultimately test it. And most of our projects these days focus around these sort of automotive mega trends, electrification, autonomy, connectivity, or shared mobility in some way. So, so this is kind of a motorsports and performance group. I'll give you one example. Here was Deep Orange 9, which was a rallycross car that was a through the road hybrid. So it had about 700 horsepower total. It had an IC engine in the back and an electric motor in the front for about 150 horsepower there. And what it was really about was the students trying to come up with what would the race experience be like for fans. Really try to understand the racing industry in general, and who all the customers are within there, from race teams to drivers, and design a vehicle around their needs that would be low cost to run, but also high performance and future looking a little bit, and maybe a little bit greener than what they were at the time. This car is now, oh goodness, maybe 7 years old, really, from when we started. And so it had catalyst systems on it, so it actually could run with high performance and be clean, and then obviously had the electrification piece where you could capture regenerative braking and also improve performance with things like active suspension and four-wheel independent steering, so that you could or four-wheel steering, I should say, so that the car could adapt itself to different parts of the track that it went on in rallycross, where you might have dirt and pavement and jumps and these kinds of things. So that was kind of our first start into motorsports. And then a few years ago, just prior to COVID, it seems like a decade ago at this point, in 2019, we were invited to a workshop at Indianapolis Motor Speedway from economic development entity Energy Systems Network in Indiana. And they brought universities in from all over the world. And John mentioned this a little bit. They brought universities in from all over the world, and they said, we want to race head-to-head autonomous vehicles at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I'm not sure what I thought about the idea, to be honest, as a traditional race fan, what I thought about it. But I also, thinking back, said, well, this is an amazing opportunity for our students, and this would be really hard, right? It'd be really cool to do, and it'd be just really neat to be able to build a vehicle that might run at Indianapolis, because it's such a famous facility. And at that meeting, what basically came down to is everybody in the room except me was a computer science person, and they really wanted a vehicle that would run, and they just put their software code into it. And I was the only one that was interested in trying to figure out how to design the vehicle. And so we brought that back to Clemson and made it our Deep Orange 12, we call it, or our 12th generation Deep Orange project, where we worked with Dallara and about 36 other partners really to design a new powertrain that's sort of autonomous vehicle specific. It's still an IC engine because of the power levels we needed, but then also integrate an autonomy stack, or basically completely replace the driver. And of course, it all had to fit in the tub of the race vehicle and be similar weight and meet the performance requirements for the series. And so this is Deep Orange 12. What ultimately happened with this vehicle is it was duplicated 10 times in Indianapolis, and it's used by other universities from around the world. So there are currently nine university teams that race these vehicles from all over the place. Clemson's actually not one of them because it was a conflict of interest for us to build the vehicle and race it. But these 9 teams from around the world, now they go and compete. As John mentioned, there was $1 million prize at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This is an example of them doing head-to-head passes. It's actually muted out. I'm not sure how well it comes through on your screens, but they're going over 100, and I think this pass here was around 165 miles an hour or so ultimately that they made. And so there are no drivers in these vehicles. The vehicles are making all of their own decisions on the fly. The car actually is the only one came down. They spun out. They misread where the other vehicle was. I think the sun had something to do with it as well. But it gives you some kind of a feel for where they're at today. They're not, head-to-head racing with 33 cars at the start of the Indy 500 or something like that. It's not really there. What they're working on is trying to work on these sort of passing competitions, if you will, where you can get out there and start to build up the software algorithms that it takes to someday replace a human driver. So that's a good one. I'm sure we'll want to chat about that one a little bit going forward, because that's gone forward. And as John mentioned, they'll race again at CES, and I'm not sure what the format will look like there, but it's really the teams have really come a long way, and it's a student educational process. Really, it's a STEM education type project. And we recently just unveiled with a vehicle with the U.S. Army. This was Deep Orange 13. I had very little to do with this, but I want to show you to get a feel for it. But we're looking at tracked vehicles, which are a completely different animal from wheeled vehicles these days. And it is really our first go at off-road racing, or off-road, in this case, not racing, but off-road autonomy, which, as John mentioned earlier, is this unstructured environment is incredibly difficult. And so, the speeds are much lower for these types of off-road vehicles, and this works as an R&D platform for us and our students and our researchers going forward. So, John, that's what I had. I guess maybe we're open for questions, and I can stop sharing and mute it out.
Yep, excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. And excellent. I think one of the questions I want to ask, and we'll get back to this as well, is again, it's developing the Deep Orange program, and I don't know if you can tell us about Deep Orange 15 coming up. Anything
I'm not allowed to do that quite yet, John, but you can imagine we're quite interested in off-road racing, and you mentioned something like King of the Hammers earlier, so I don't know, maybe I'll just let your imagination go a little bit, but looking at these automotive megatrends, on all of the projects and our new ones that we look at, we definitely want things like autonomy, electrification need to be in there, and then this, we've been working really closely with the U.S. Army recently on off-road autonomy, and so you can imagine we're going to try to combine all these pieces together in some way. That's all I'm at liberty to say.
Yeah, no, I had to try.
Yeah, okay.
But so let's circle back to you. But I think we want to talk about the Viper program too in just a bit because of the processes. But I want to circle back to you, Dave. I think again, from an EV racing perspective, and it was actually our colleague, if you will, Michael Andretti, said it last year on this EPAR trade program. He said when he talks about EV racing to his sponsors and his partners, he says they lean in because that's what they want to learn more about and get involved with. And again, he helps provide some of that as one of the other team owners as well. But from your perspective, Dave, how is Chip Ganassi Racing using what you're learning from Extreme E into their IndyCar program and all the other programs that you guys have with Chip?
Yeah, I think in one word, it's innovation, right? I mean, motorsports loves innovation. I mean, we want to be at the cutting edge. Every team wants to be at the cutting edge. And we want to go racing where the OEMs want to go racing. And the OEMs are all looking for market share, and that's around innovation. And so, I think when we look at the cross section of motorsports programs that are inside the building here with both the sports car program with Cadillac, that's obviously going to be going globally racing with the IMSA program and WEC program next year. That's with a hybrid driveline. You know, Indy Cars got a hybrid driveline coming here over the next, you know, year and a half. And this was an opportunity with Extreme E to look at an all electric driveline. So, you know, inside the building, we have 3 different programs, all, you know, cutting edge, innovative programs that are all touching on electrification, touching on hybridization. What's interesting about it is they're all in a different form factor. You know, Extreme E, all electric, IndyCar, a little bit of a different form factor, and sports car, a little bit of a different form factor with a IC and a power cell. I think for, you know, the bigger organization, we want to be relevant. I think we always want to be relevant. We want to be relevant to our sponsors, to our OEM partners, and we want to be racing at the front of the pack. You know, Chip says it well, like, we're here to win. You know, that's it. You know, all stop. So, you know, we're gonna learn and have learnings to make sure we can keep and stay at the front of the pack there. So yeah, it's really exciting, and it's exciting to see that across 3 different programs. I will say some of it is, you know, we're talking about high level engineering stuff like what Rob's students are talking about, but the other side of it is we're just talking you know, at the mechanic level about, you know, what are the safety parameters to working with these cars, right? Because they're all different. You know, what are you know, all of a sudden we have big heavy duty chargers in our bays. You know, we have to, you know, put green top hats on the car when it's safe and when it's been safety checked. So it's all these processes that we are iterating through as we learn about this. What I would say is, you know, Rob and his team, frankly, are, you know, 10 years ahead of us as a race organization, because they have been developing all this stuff almost as like a you know, an OEM, if you will, Rob, when you start talking about the you know, autonomous challenge there. So it's cool to be part of it. Everybody inside the building is excited about it, and like you mentioned, sponsors are leaning in on it, of course, just like every other branch of motorsports. Them leaning in and then them, you know, getting involved sometimes is 2 different things, but yeah, it's really cool, and it's cool to be part of.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I don't know that we're 10 years ahead of you, but I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you know, autonomy is a different animal, and it's probably another 10 or more years further down the line compared to electrification, right? And so it kind of makes sense that it falls at a university, and it's not a professional series because I'm not sure it could be yet, right? But what's interesting with the autonomous group, this type of racing, is that it brings in an entirely different set of sponsors, right? And you look at the people that show up to these events, it's engaging in an entirely different, I guess, fan base, you know, and it's really about education, but it's also, you know, it's a new set of companies that come around that are different than what you see in a lot of the areas of motorsports. And we also looked at electrification for the autonomous vehicle. For the off-road military work, we actually are using hybrid electric powertrains there, because it is actually a pretty big advantage to use them there. And but we struggle with the same thing you did, which is, you know, the safety around that, and how you really, you know, how do you set up safety systems? How do you make sure that high voltage vehicle is safe before you go up to it? And of course, then you have course workers and other things that you have to work around and try to figure that out. Do you have the right type of fire systems on the vehicle and all of that? And you know, what's interesting for us, and I guess in the spirit of this panel, is that those are also the same types of issues that the U.S. Army would work on, or would worry about, right? Because they're going to take you know, young, maybe 18 or 20-year-olds and put them around these vehicles. And so that's a really big aspect of it, is to make sure that if you move toward, you know, electrification or autonomy, that these vehicles are in some way communicating back to the people around it so that they know that it is safe to approach. This is a completely different world, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and you know, Dave mentioned that safety as well, Rob. And with I know one of the things we're studying with some of the projects we're working on together, all of us, are the rollovers. And I guess battery manufacturers are very concerned when the vehicle rolls over. What could possibly happen? Certainly military as well as racing applications, and all the certainly de-energizing the vehicle before you can extract a driver, or that someone, you know, a course worker or a first responder could actually help extricate a driver or help in an autonomous situation actually touch the vehicle. So lots to learn there.
And what's kind of interesting there, we talked about it, you know, you probably could not introduce gasoline into the market today, if you thought about it, you know, and so we're kind of used to that, right, a little bit, and how to deal with it from a safety point of view. It's a very scary fuel in itself, right? And so I don't know that it's any worse than what we're currently working with. It's just a different set of rules that we have to follow, and you know, there are some different challenges with it, but I don't think there's anything we can't overcome. And obviously, you know, Dave, these guys are out racing them regularly, so it's not, you know, it's not impossible, obviously.
Yeah, I think, again, you got to start somewhere to learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we look at the Extreme E program specifically, Williams Advanced Technologies or Williams Advanced Engineering is building our battery pack. And, you know, it's, you know, all you need to do is Google the Extreme E crash highlights to see the impacts that the series has had over the last 2 years. And we've had very few minor, what I would categorize as red light situations, right?
Good.
You know, where there maybe is a loss of isolation or something like that in the battery. We've had nothing significant as far as a major issue. And when you think about the test bed of what we're doing there, and you know, the history of motorsports of testing and really validating technologies on a Sunday to put into you know, the Monday's cars, I think it tells the story appropriately. You know, people are still getting to terms with electrification, you know, high voltage batteries, range anxiety. I mean, all those things. And I think that the motorsports is a critical part to telling that story.
Absolutely. I think, and again, I want to tell the audience about Viper program, Rob. And one of, I think, ways to lead into that is what Mark Royce calls the Ultium effect. The Ultium being the platform, the digital vehicle architecture that GM has actually have on the Corvette, I think. And is it on the Hummer, Dave?
Yeah, the Ultium is their battery. Yeah, the General Motors battery technology, and it's going to be across their fleet. And it really is an amazing process to be able to build, you know, skateboards that'll touch every single one of their every single one of their automotive platforms. So yeah, it's a really cool process that General Motors has taken across all their brands.
Oh yeah, and I commend Mark and Mary for leading that, but also people like Jim Campbell that are going to take that, you know, from racing and, you know, really put Ultium through the paces to bring that to the consumer, but to demonstrate how the, you know, the quickness, if you will, the sensor fusion, software integration, all that happening on the race level. But Rob, from a Viper perspective, a lot of that is virtual prototyping and simulation, and that's what you guys are really helping lead to create not just new knowledge, but new engineers.
Yeah, so thanks, John. Yeah, so at Clemson, we have what we call the Viper GS Center, which is funded by the U.S. Army. We have about 150 people here doing research, and it's really around, I guess the general theme is, how do you more quickly design vehicles that are incredibly complex, right? And so where does the complexity come from? Well, things like electrification, right, and autonomy as well, right, and of course new materials and everything around that. And so this is really, we focus a lot on that. And what's interesting is we see a lot of similarities between racing and their needs in the U.S. Army. You know, whether it's something like thermal management. I think David mentioned that earlier. You know, it's a really difficult challenge in racing, right? You really want to be, you know, really efficient heat exchangers, say for good aerodynamics, so the vehicle is small and fast. And the off-road environment is different because you're going slow at really high power levels, and maybe you have a lot of armor or whatever it is around your cooling systems. And so you kind of have, you both have these same issues with cooling, right? It's one of the major things that we look at within our center, but for different reasons, right? So we've kind of learned some things from the motorsports world that I think actually can help the Army or the off-road world.
Yeah, one of the questions that came in through the chat room was from a surface coatings perspective. Do you see anything in racing and innovation for surface coatings coming out of any of the racing programs that you're involved with or the applications?
I think that that would go down to, parasitic drag. Anything that we can make more slippery on any moving part is, coatings and treatments. So yeah, I mean, of course, that's almost a no-brainer there for us. Coatings, treatments, and oil compounds within the rules is definitely a big portion of horsepower or an electrification kilowatt power. So yeah.
One of the things we've noticed around coatings when we were working on these small Indy cars or these AV21 cars, the LiDARs don't necessarily pick them up. So because they're so small, right? If you stand next to one of these cars, they're about knee high, and you need to see them from really far distance down the road and down the track. And the LiDARs they struggle to do that because there really aren't a lot of points in the point cloud in this little bitty vehicle. And so that's actually an opportunity, I think, to make coatings for vehicles that are a little more visible for things like LiDARs or cameras, right? Or radars even, right? So there is some need there. So I would say, like, from an autonomy point of view, or even within racing, that's probably one of the needs that we didn't really expect, but we think we're going to need going forward. And then there's the other side of it too, where maybe if you're, I don't know, the U.S. Army, you may not want, to have a reflection from a LiDAR, from your vehicle. So maybe the coating wants to absorb things. I don't know. So you kind of, there's a lot there still. I'm sure, embedding sensors and things in coatings is not entirely new, but that's something that's also, certainly of interest. And I think the question really asks kind of how do you filter out these different technologies. It's tough to do, and figure out where to go. But racing teams are a good litmus test usually. If you go to them, they're really sharp with this kind of work, and can probably be a good place to start.
Absolutely, reducing those parasitic losses, as Dave said, but also reducing the friction and the heat signature, because you want to be stealth, particularly the electric vehicle is quiet, inherently quiet, but the running gear, etc. So getting into situations where you want to get in fast and get out fast, both wire. So this is our last question. This is a white flag lap. You guys know what I typically ask, so but I'm going to change it up a bit. So if at the next race, who would you want to invite as your personal guest? It could be the next Extreme E-Race or the 500, Dave, or Rob. It could be on January 7th at CES with the Indy Autonomous Challenge Race. Who would you want there as your personal guest? And it could be several, living or dead. We'll start with you, Rob. Who would you want to have there as your personal guest?
I would have said Elon Musk until he bought Twitter, and but yeah, I'm not. Boy, John, that's a hard one. I mean, I want you there, but I think I don't know. I kind of think there are a couple people that come to mind. They're pretty visionary. Obviously, Henry Ford was one of them, right? To try to make a vehicle for masses. And the other one that we had a chance to meet was Ratan Tata from Tata Motors, and I tried to make the Nano, like $2,000 car. I don't know, just very visionary people. I think both of those people to have them there would be pretty neat, just to hear what they have to say about these vehicles and kind of what we're trying to do with them. So
I remember one rainy day at the SEMA show, you and I were up on one of the rooftops watching Global Rallycross with Chip Ganassi.
Yeah, with Chip, yes.
And snowing, we had students up there, and Chip turned, he says, you guys have to keep technology at the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. So turn over to you, Dave. Next race, who would you want to have there as your personal guest?
I'm going to throw the same one out that I threw out last time, which is, Kelly Johnson, founder of Skunk Works.
You love that Skunk Works.
Yeah. I just think that when you talk about, really high level innovation, trying to, be more than 10 years in the future. I'm not sure there's a better representation of an individual that's, really jumped into that, like, Skunk Works and those guys. So that's probably my name.
Good choice. I'd like to be at both those races with you guys. And again, you don't want to be average anymore. You want to step into the future. And if Rob's 10 years into the future, let's get a DeLorean and go down there.
Sounds good.
Pick you up
88
Andy.
miles an hour, John.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's one of Kyle LeDuc's favorite cars, the
Yeah,
DeLorean.
that'd be
So
cool.
it's, yeah, really cool.
Well, I see Judy and Francisco around, which means we're pretty much wrapping this up. But thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Rob, for being part of E-Part Trade Race Industry Week 2022.
Of course. Thank you, gentlemen. What a great session.
Registering on E-Part Trade is easy. To start, click on the Join for Free button on the homepage. First, search your company to see if it's already in our database. If you see your company on the list, click on it to select it. Then, choose Claim Company if you are one of the decision makers, an owner, marketing person, or main company contact. Or choose Join Company if you are an employee, and press Continue. If you couldn't find your company in our database, select Register a New Company. On the following page, fill out your name, email, phone number, job title, and choose a secure password. If you chose Register a New Company, you'll need to choose your business type. Select Supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose Racing Business if you're looking to source new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose Race Team if you own or are a member of a professional race team. Then, enter your company name. Please provide a website, Facebook page, or LinkedIn if you have one, and choose to either claim or join the company. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Finally, click Register Now and your registration will be submitted for approval. An email will be sent to your inbox. Please confirm your email address and you will be approved shortly. Welcome to E-Part Trade.